Hey, remember this Ford Mustang Shelby GT500 we bought back in January? Well, we had a lot of fun plans with it, but 2020 had other ideas. Hey, step back, keep your distance, okay? We good? All right. Well, now that our test track is back open, we finally get to test it. We're going to talk about what it's been like to own this vehicle for the past few months and see what its supercharged V8 goodness has felt like and what it's also meant in terms of fuel economy. Then we're going to test it and we're going to find out how those performance figures that we generate here compare to that of the carbon fiber track pack GT500 we tested late last year. We'll see if the $18,500 that option costs, what that's actually worth in performance data. Anyway, hit the links below to visit Edmunds.com and see more about our experience with this vehicle, and also be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll get on with the rest of the video. Hey, kids! One of the awesome things about living in California is not only do you have 91 octane fuel as your best fuel choice, you also have to have a front license plate, especially if you're in Santa Monica. They really seem to enjoy ticketing vehicles without front plates. Now, if you look at the GT500, there aren't a lot of obvious places to put one. You have these two dimples in the bumper that you could use to drill in and put a bracket there, but you really don't want to drill into the front bumper of your GT500. We actually went to an aftermarket company called Grimspeed, and they sold us this bracket, which is actually intended to be used on a Ford Focus RS. It works really well in this case and threads into the tow hook threaded receiver, and that means it's easy to install and easy to remove when you want to go to a track day. So now our GT500 is, just barely on the right side of legal, good stuff. Yep. Now we get to talk about fuel economy, and when we do that, we're gonna pop the hood. It's kind of like, I think, what was the Big Short, where they had to use celebrities to talk about the financial crisis to keep people interested? Anyway, let's show off this. These things get really hot, and they are kind of sticky, which is really fun. Black hood pins, who would have thought? It's a great idea in the California sun. Anyway, fuel economy, look at this engine. All right, we have just over 5,000 miles on this GT500, and so far our average fuel economy has been 12.4 MPG. That sounds low, it actually matches the EPA's city rating. We have recorded as high as 22 MPG on a road trip, but most of our fills tend to be in the low teens. We actually have a number of fills that are under 10 MPG. Now, of course, it's 760 horsepower. You shouldn't expect good fuel economy, but you should also know how quickly this engine consumes fuel. Back when we tested the carbon fiber track pack GT500, we went through an entire tank in a matter of hours. We've actually ran into situations with this car where the low fuel light came on and the fuel gauge showed half a tank. Like, this thing really likes to go through fuel in a way that we haven't experienced from the Camaro ZL1 and both Dodge Challenger and Dodge Charger Hellcat variants. If gasoline was gin, this car would be Winston Churchill. If gas were a social media currency, this car is Gen Z. Zing! This thing just is really bad with fuel economy. That being said, outside of the fuel economy, this thing has been a terrific daily driver. We've done road trips, we've done commuting, we've ran errands with it, and it's like a normal Mustang, just with an ungodly amount of power and ridiculous acceleration. But as long as you don't really experience that, it's just slightly louder, which is really nice. Now let's get to testing. Now, the first thing we typically start with is weighing the car. I know what you're saying, no way, and I'm gonna say, yes way. It's the first part of the testing process. Huh. I was a mile away. I'm a pro vehicle tester. Normally when it comes to vehicle weight, we just report the figure and move on, unless there's something significant. In this case, that significance is the existence of the carbon fiber track pack, because it comes with carbon fiber wheels that are not only much stiffer than these flow-formed aluminum wheels that this GT500 has, but they're a lot lighter too, and that weight comes off one of the most important parts of the vehicle, and that is unsprung mass around the corners. You probably heard about that. Google it. More time than we have to talk about in this video in particular. Now, we weighed the carbon fiber GT500, or the carbon fiber track pack GT500, back in December, and it weighed, wait for it, 4,058 pounds, and that weight was split front 57%, 43% into the rear. This GT500 weighed 4,168 pounds, split 56% front and 44% rear. That's 110 pounds more than the carbon fiber track pack, which is Less than I would have thought, but it does kind of make sense when you figure that the carbon fiber track pack's biggest weight difference advantage is those carbon fiber wheels. So there you go. Yes way. If you recall from our unboxing video, the GT500 in the owner's manual explained the proper brake burnishing procedure. Why would you do that? Well, think of it like preparing the braking system for high-speed driving like you would do on a racetrack. We're gonna do it now because we have a testing area, and why not? Now, how do you do this process? Well, there's actually 2 steps to this process. The first, though, we can skip because it's designed for brand new brakes or brand new pads, which we don't have. We've got 5,000 miles on this car, they're set. But the second step, we have to refer to the notes I took on my phone, so we'll ask Arnie about how to get them done. The second step requires 15 consecutive stops back to back, accelerating at 3/4 throttle to 80 miles an hour, and then braking to 20 miles an hour at 1G of acceleration. How do you measure 1G? Well, in most cases, that's basically peak braking effort in most performance cars. And the GT500, like a lot of performance cars, actually has a meter on the dash that'll give us a live G readout, so I'll try to refer to that. Let's get started. And keep in mind, 760 horsepower means 3/4 throttle is a lot of power. So we probably don't need to spend a lot of time at 3/4 throttle. Yeah, that happens. That gets 80 real quick. First stop. Okay, back up to 80. Second stop. All right, let's get back to 80. That's stop 4. The tough part's remembering. Doing this repeatedly is going to make somebody nauseous. Stop 14. Stop 15. Last stop. Ugh. Whew.
How was that experience for you, Carlos?
That was, I'm gonna keep inching forward so I don't stop on hot brakes. But man, doing a 1G stops and then like almost a G acceleration back to back 15 times is a recipe for nausea. Pro tip, don't do that. So we've illustrated the brake burnishing procedure, and how about one more braking run, this time for real. This time we're gonna illustrate an actual emergency stop from 60 miles an hour. This is of course for illustration purposes, not for testing. We've already done that, but I just wanna show you what that looks like and then tell you the result. So, our best stop from 60 in this GT500 was 103 feet. That's of course a little bit longer than what we got in the carbon fiber track pack that we tested previously. That was like 98 feet. But why is that? Well, the biggest difference in a car's braking performance has to do with the tires. The GT500 with the carbon fiber track pack gets really sticky Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s, while the standard GT500 gets still good but less sticky Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. And that brings up the difference in braking performance. 103 feet is still really good though, and most sports cars should aim for that level, so I'm pretty happy with this performance. But now let's go to acceleration, which should be a bit more fun, yeah? Now, the Edmunds testing process, when it comes to acceleration, we always start with what we call the key up acceleration run. And the intention there is to mimic what happens if you were to just turn the car on, put it in drive, and mash the gas. Now, when we did that with the GT500, we recorded a 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds without rollout, 3.7 seconds with rollout. If you recall, rollout is when you subtract about a foot of the first initial acceleration to simulate more like what happens on a drag strip, even though we're not trying to measure that. Don't worry about it, it's semantics. Just know that those are the figures that you would compare to most car magazines because they all test with rollout. But the quarter mile happened in 11.8 seconds at nearly 130 miles an hour from just putting it in drive and mashing the gas. Wow. Now, if you want to actually care about making the car go even faster, the way to do that is make sure you're in drive, of course. Put the car in sport mode. We do have launch control, but our team found it was faster to just do it ourselves. Traction control or advanced track off. Suspension in sport. Make sure the steering's there too, just for a little bit more control. Now, when you're in this position, we're also gonna put the exhaust in track because you wanna hear this thing. Now, we're in this setup, you're gonna start with applying a little bit of brake pressure while rolling on that gas pedal. You can't just slap the gas pedal, you have to roll onto it just so the rear tires have a chance. We have 760 horsepower, so you gotta give them a chance to do that. Let's do this. Light brake pressure, roll on the gas pedal. Oh boy! So not that I got it exactly right there, but when you do, like our test team did, we recorded 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds without rollout and 3.4 seconds with rollout. We're going to talk about skid pad last, frankly, because it's kind of a boring test to watch and it's also kind of a boring test to run. You're just driving in a circle making lots of horrific tire noises. But we're going to talk about it last because it has to do with the value of the carbon fiber track package. If you've been keeping tabs with the results of this car versus the one we tested previously, you might be wondering where that money is going to, that $18,500. This car is 110 pounds heavier than the carbon fiber track package, and if you divide that by the cost of the package, you get $168 per pound. Yes, it's unsprung weight and there's more to it than that, but we're just gonna leave it simple for the sake of building a case of absurdity. Now, when you measure braking distances, this stopped in 103 feet and the carbon fiber track package did 98 feet. Now, if you were to do $1 per foot, that is $3,083. Now, when we talk about acceleration, it gets even weirder because to 60 miles an hour, this GT500 was basically as fast as the carbon fiber track pack to 60. Why is that? Well, there's a couple of factors at play and you can put your weight or your thought behind a couple of different ones, right? So the first off, 760 horsepower and 2 drive wheels. You're traction limited. No matter how much power you have or how much tire you have, you're always gonna be at that threshold. And when you're launching it without using launch control because you like doing it manually, that's kind of just what you're gonna get. There's also another factor at play. This GT500 has the street alignment where its tires are basically more vertical. The carbon fiber track pack had the track alignment setting. Both are outlined in the owner's manual if you go back and watch our unwrapping video of this car. Now, that track package or that track alignment setting is gonna make the tires kind of bow out a little bit more so they work better when you're going around corners like on a racetrack. That's gonna hurt acceleration. And I bring that up to talk about the skid pad. This GT500 in its street alignment setting averaged 1.02 G on the skid pad. That's a really, really good result for any sports car. But that carbon fiber track package GT500 with the track alignment setting did 1.17 G, which was a figure so high we actually had to double check the data to make sure it was legit. It's among the highest we've ever recorded, and that's spectacular performance. So if you want to know where that $18,500 really goes to, it's that kind of experience. It's that road holding and that level of grip, and it's also, you know, a little bit nicer to drive when you're going at that extreme cornering as well. So if you're dead set on track days, that's probably the direction to go. But for most people like us, this GT500 as it sits is the right solution. See ya, suckers!